All right, so today we're diving into some pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Nuclear war.
Yeah.
But we're not gonna you know, go all sensationalist or doomsday prepper on you. We're
Right.
gonna really try to break down the realities of this threat.
Yeah.
And we're gonna be doing that based on a book called Nuclear War. A Scenario
Okay.
by Annie Jacobson. And she did this great interview on the Diary of a CEO YouTube channel.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
And she has spent her career interviewing these top military and intelligence officials. So she's not just speculating.
Right.
She's really giving us a glimpse, I think, behind the curtain.
Yeah, and one of the things that's so striking about her work is just how fast
Yeah.
a nuclear conflict could unfold.
Yeah.
Like, we tend to imagine, this would all play out over days or weeks,
Right.
but the reality is
Yeah.
it's so much faster.
So how fast are we talking about here?
I mean, we're talking about intercontinental ballistic missiles, or ICBMs,
Huh?
capable of traveling from one continent to another in about 30 minutes. Like, think about that. Half an hour
Yeah.
from launch to impact,
Oh, yeah. That's insane.
potentially changing the course of history.
I mean, 30 minutes is not even really enough time to grasp what's happening, let
Yeah.
alone coordinate a response.
Exactly. And that's why, in the U.S., the president has sole authority to launch a nuclear counterattack.
Really?
There's just no time for, congressional debates or strategy sessions.
Wow.
It comes down to one person
Mm.
making a life or death decision
Yeah.
in a matter of minutes.
So, is there no oversight for that? I mean,
Yeah.
is there really no system of checks and balances when it comes to something like this?
Well, this is a question that has been debated for decades.
I bet.
And it really came to a head during the Trump administration.
Okay.
Congress formally requested clarification
Yeah.
from the executive branch on this whole issue of presidential authority.
Okay.
And the report that came back
Yeah.
confirmed that the president, the president alone, has the power to authorize a nuclear strike
Really?
without needing approval from anyone else.
So the fate of the world could literally rest
Mm-hmm.
on the judgment of a single individual.
It's a pretty sobering thought.
It's a terrifying thought.
And Jacobson even talks about this
Yeah.
anecdote about President Nixon during Watergate.
Oh, yeah.
Under immense pressure, potentially intoxicated,
Yeah.
making threats about using nuclear weapons.
Oh.
Now, these were likely just blustering attempts to project strength.
Right.
But the fact that a president in that state even had the capacity to make those threats
Yeah.
is really disturbing.
Yeah, it just highlights the human element of all of this.
Oh.
We tend to think of it as just this abstract concept of nuclear war,
Yeah,
but it really comes down to people making decisions.
Wow.
And people are fallible.
absolutely. And to understand the full weight of those potential decisions,
Yeah.
we need to grasp how nuclear weapons have evolved since 1945.
Mhm.
And the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were horrific,
Yes.
but they pale in comparison to the destructive power of today's thermonuclear weapons.
So these are way more powerful than the ones used in World War II.
Orders of magnitude more powerful.
Wow. Can you explain that?
Sure, to put it into perspective, Jacobson interviewed Richard Garwin,
Okay.
the physicist who actually designed the first hydrogen bomb,
Wow.
which is a type of thermonuclear weapon.
Okay.
And he describes how these bombs utilize fusion reactions, releasing energy far beyond what's possible with the fission-based atomic bombs.
Right.
So we're not just talking about bigger explosions.
Yeah.
We're talking about an entirely different level of destructive potential.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not just about the bombs themselves.
Right.
It's about how they can be delivered.
Exactly.
And this is where we get into the concept of the nuclear triad.
The nuclear triad, precisely.
Okay.
It's a three-pronged approach to nuclear deterrence, ensuring that a country can retaliate even if one or two of its delivery systems are taken out.
Okay.
It consists of land-based ICBMs, which we've already discussed.
Yeah.
Submarine-launched ballistic missiles,
Okay.
and strategic bombers.
So what's the advantage of each of those?
Well, land-based ICBMs offer rapid response capabilities and are generally viewed as the most visible and deterring element of the triad. Strategic bombers provide flexibility
Okay.
because they can be recalled or redirected mid-flight,
Interesting.
allowing for a more nuanced response.
Right.
But it's the submarines that are arguably the most chilling aspect of the triad,
Why is that?
because these nuclear-armed submarines are virtually undetectable.
Really?
They lurk silently beneath the ocean's surface, essentially impossible to track.
Wow.
creating this constant unseen threat.
So it's like this constant threat that's just lurking out there.
Jacobson quotes a former submarine commander who compared finding a nuclear sub underwater to finding a grapefruit in space.
Wow, that's a good analogy.
It highlights just how elusive these vessels are.
Okay, so we have these unbelievably powerful weapons.
Yeah.
Multiple ways to deliver them at incredible speed.
Yeah.
And this terrifying amount of decision-making power in the hands of a single person.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just about the U.S., right?
Yeah.
We have to consider the global landscape.
You're absolutely right. The nuclear threat isn't confined to one nation.
Right.
Jacobson points out that 9 countries currently possess nuclear weapons.
9.
The U.S., Russia, China, the U.K., France, India, Pakistan, Israel, and North Korea.
Wow.
And there's growing concern that Iran could soon join that list,
Right.
further destabilizing an already volatile situation.
And a lot of these countries are currently engaged in some level of conflict,
Yeah.
whether it's directly or through proxies.
Right.
So that really raises the stakes.
It does. The UN Secretary General recently made a statement warning that we're essentially one misunderstanding away from nuclear Armageddon.
That's a chilling statement.
It is.
Okay, so let's zoom back in on the U.S. for a second
Yes.
and talk about the football.
Okay.
This briefcase that we always see carried by a military aide near the president.
Right.
What exactly is in there?
The football is kind of an ominous symbol of the president's nuclear authority.
Yeah.
It contains 2 key components.
Yeah.
Authentication tools to verify the president's identity
Okay.
to the military command center, and perhaps more importantly, the Black Book.
The Black Book, I've always wondered what's in there.
The Black Book is essentially a menu of nuclear strike options.
So in the event of a nuclear attack,
Yeah.
the president is faced with this book,
Right.
this terrifying catalog of apocalyptic choices,
Yeah.
and has to make a decision
Right.
with world-altering consequences,
Under unimaginable pressure.
all with that 30-minute clock ticking away.
Exactly. And what makes this even more unsettling
Yeah.
is that, according to Jacobson,
Mm-hmm.
these pre-prepared options are often heavily simplified,
Oh, wow.
presented in a way that might not fully convey the true scale and complexity of the consequences. So a president, even with the best of intentions, might not fully comprehend the ramifications of their choice.
It's like a high-stakes game of nuclear roulette.
Yeah.
But hasn't there been any effort to,
Yeah.
introduce more checks and balances, more time for deliberation, a more nuanced approach to this?
Well, there have been discussions and proposals over the years,
Okay.
but the fundamental challenge is speed.
Right.
The nature of nuclear warfare, with its incredibly short time frames,
Yeah.
makes it virtually impossible to implement traditional checks and balances or allow for extensive deliberation.
So the system as it stands is designed for rapid response,
It is.
which puts a tremendous amount of power in the hands of a single individual.
Yes, and this makes those historical examples of false alarms
Yeah,
and close calls even more unsettling.
absolutely. Jacobson actually shares a story about Bill Perry, who served as Secretary of Defense during the Clinton administration,
Right.
back when he was an undersecretary in the Carter administration. He was informed that Soviet missiles were inbound,
Wow.
seemingly confirming everyone's worst fears.
Oh my gosh, so they were actually under attack.
Thankfully, no. It turned out to be a false alarm,
Wow.
but a terrifyingly plausible one.
Yeah.
A technician at NORAD had mistakenly inserted a training tape
Oh.
simulating a Soviet attack,
Wow.
and the information cascaded up the chain of command as a real threat.
So a simple human error, a misplaced VHS tape,
Yeah.
could have potentially triggered a nuclear war.
That's almost too much to comprehend.
It highlights the fragility of the system
Yeah.
and how easily a catastrophic mistake could occur, even without malicious intent.
Right.
And this vulnerability isn't just a relic of the past.
Yeah.
Jacobson points out that similar technological glitches and communication errors
Really?
have occurred in more recent years,
Oh.
underscoring the fact that this threat is still very much present.
And it makes you wonder how many other close calls we haven't heard about. But haven't there been more systematic efforts to analyze the potential outcomes of a nuclear conflict?
Yes. There have been numerous war games and simulations conducted over the years,
Okay.
attempting to model the complex dynamics of a nuclear exchange.
What have we learned from these?
Well, Jacobson discusses a particularly significant one called Proud Prophet,
Okay.
conducted in 1983.
Okay.
This war game involved high-ranking officials and military strategists
Uh-huh.
playing out a simulated nuclear exchange between the U.S. and the Soviet Union.
And what were the key takeaways?
The most chilling revelation was that regardless of who initiated the conflict
Yeah.
or the specific targets chosen,
Mm-hmm.
a nuclear war inevitably spiraled into global annihilation.
Wow.
There were no scenarios in which one side emerged victorious or even remotely unscathed.
So even if we avoid the accidental launches,
Yeah.
misinterpretations,
Right.
the nature of nuclear war makes it a lose-lose proposition
It does.
for everyone on the planet.
And to understand the sheer scale of that potential loss,
Yeah.
we need to delve into Jacobson's detailed account of what those first 72 minutes of a nuclear war might actually look like.
Okay.
It's a harrowing journey through a cascade of events, decisions, and consequences that unfold with terrifying speed.
Yeah. All right, so let's take a deep breath for a second.
Okay.
And then we'll come back and break that down.
So imagine this U.S. satellites detect a launch,
Okay.
setting off an alarm that reverberates through the corridors of power.
Yeah.
Within seconds, confirmation comes in.
Mm-hmm.
A nuclear missile is on its way,
Oh, wow.
targeting somewhere on U.S. soil.
So the clock is ticking. What happens next?
The president is immediately alerted,
Okay.
along with key military commanders and advisors.
Right.
The football is rushed to their side. That ominous black book opened,
Yeah.
and the president is faced with an unimaginable decision.
Mm-hmm.
Retaliate or absorb the blow.
But wouldn't a counterattack just escalate things,
Right.
leading to all-out nuclear war?
That's the terrifying dilemma.
Yeah.
The current doctrine, based on the principle of mutually assured destruction,
Right.
hinges on the idea that the threat of overwhelming retaliation
Yeah.
is what prevents a first strike.
Okay.
But in that moment, with the weight of the world on their shoulders
Yeah.
and limited time to assess the situation,
Mm-hmm.
the president has to decide whether to follow that doctrine,
Wow.
knowing that doing so could unleash unimaginable devastation.
I can't even imagine the pressure of that.
Right.
What factors would they even consider in those few minutes?
They'd be looking at intelligence reports,
Okay.
trying to determine the origin of the attack,
Mm-hmm.
the number of missiles launched,
Yeah.
the potential targets, and the likely casualties.
Okay.
But even with the most advanced technology,
Right.
there's always room for error,
Yeah.
misinterpretation, or incomplete information.
So while all of this is happening,
Right.
the clock is still ticking,
Mm-hmm.
and that missile is getting closer.
Yeah.
What's happening on the ground? Are there evacuation procedures, or is it just chaos?
Jacobson describes a scenario where the president is immediately whisked away to a secure location,
Okay.
potentially even parachuting from Marine 1 if Washington, D.C. is the target.
Ah.
Simultaneously, attempts are made to alert the public.
Okay.
But depending on the target and the warning time,
Right.
it's likely that many people would have little to no time to react.
So millions of people are just going about their daily lives.
Yeah.
Completely unaware of the threat.
And even if some people do receive warning, what can they realistically do?
Right.
There are no truly effective shelters or evacuation plans for a large-scale nuclear attack.
Yeah.
It's a scenario that exposes the limits of our preparedness
Mm.
and the stark reality of our vulnerability.
So while the president is being rushed to safety and trying to figure out a response,
Yeah.
what's happening with that incoming missile?
U.S. military systems would be tracking its trajectory,
Okay.
trying to intercept it if possible. But even the most advanced missile defense systems have limitations,
Right.
and there's no guarantee of success.
And what if they can't stop it?
Then we enter the realm of impact and immediate aftermath.
Okay.
Jacobson describes the blast itself, the blinding flash, the deafening roar,
Yeah.
the shock wave that pulverizes everything in its path.
It's hard to even imagine.
Buildings crumble, infrastructure collapses,
Yeah.
and those caught in the immediate vicinity are instantly vaporized.
So beyond the initial blast, what are the long-term effects?
That's where things get even more horrifying.
Okay.
Jacobson dives into the gruesome details of radiation sickness,
Oh, gosh.
the lingering fallout that contaminates the air, water, and soil,
Right.
making vast areas uninhabitable for years, potentially even decades.
Wow.
And then there's the firestorms,
The firestorms. Yeah, I've read about those.
massive infernos, fueled by the debris and ignited by the intense heat of the blast.
It's hard to grasp the scale of that.
Imagine entire cities engulfed in flames.
Yeah.
The sky choked with smoke and ash.
Right.
The air itself becoming superheated and toxic.
So this would last for a while.
These firestorms would rage for days, potentially weeks.
Wow.
releasing massive amounts of soot and debris into the atmosphere.
And that's where we get into the concept of nuclear winter.
Precisely.
Okay.
All of that soot and debris combined with the dust kicked up by the explosions would create a massive cloud that envelops the planet,
Wow.
blocking out sunlight and plunging the Earth into an extended period of darkness and cold.
So can you explain the science behind that a little bit?
Essentially, it's a disruption of the Earth's climate system on a massive scale.
Okay.
With sunlight, block temperatures would plummet, agriculture would collapse,
Right.
and ecosystems would be thrown into disarray.
So even those who survived the initial blasts and the radiation would face a whole new set of challenges.
They would.
Famine, disease, and a breakdown of everything we rely on.
Jacobson paints a bleak picture of a world transformed where survivors are left to scavenge for resources in a desolate and toxic landscape.
Yeah.
It's a chilling reminder that a nuclear war wouldn't be confined to specific targets or regions.
Right.
It would have devastating consequences for the entire planet.
It's a sobering thought, to say the least.
It is.
And to think that all of this could be triggered by a single miscalculation, a technical error, or the actions of a single individual.
That's the terrifying reality we live with.
Yeah.
But what's equally terrifying is the potential for things to escalate even further in those crucial first 72 minutes.
Okay.
Remember that concept of jamming the president?
Yes, you mentioned it earlier, but you didn't really explain it.
It's a strategy that involves overwhelming communication systems with electronic interference,
Okay.
essentially blinding the enemy and preventing them from coordinating a response.
So in the context of a nuclear attack, it could mean cutting off communication between the president and military commanders,
Right.
preventing them from issuing orders or launching a counterattack.
Exactly.
So even if the president survives and wants to retaliate, they might not be able to.
The attackers could effectively paralyze the command and control structure.
Wow.
Creating a window of opportunity to inflict further damage or achieve their objectives without fear of immediate retaliation.
That's terrifying.
It adds another layer of complexity and uncertainty to an already volatile situation.
What happens if the president is incapacitated?
Yeah.
Is there like a system in place for someone else to take control?
That's where things get even more unsettling.
Okay.
Jacobson reveals the existence of something called a universal unlock code.
What?
Which is essentially a backdoor mechanism that allows a designated commander to launch nuclear weapons.
Real?
Even if the president is dead or unable to communicate.
So someone else could have the authority to launch a retaliatory strike.
That's the chilling reality of the system.
Wow.
It's designed for continuity of command,
right,
ensuring that the nuclear arsenal can be used even in the most extreme circumstances.
Yeah.
But it also raises serious concerns about the potential for unauthorized launches or rogue actions, especially in the chaos and confusion of a nuclear attack.
This is all starting to feel incredibly bleak.
Yeah.
Is there any hope in this scenario?
Jacobson doesn't leave us in a state of complete despair.
Okay.
She emphasizes that nuclear war is preventable.
Okay.
And that human choices, both at the individual and collective level, can make a difference.
Okay.
She points to historical examples, moments where leaders stepped back from the brink, where diplomacy prevailed over aggression,
right,
and where public pressure forced a shift in policy.
What about that story you mentioned earlier about President Reagan's reaction to the movie The Day After?
Right. The Day After was a made-for-TV movie that aired in 1983, depicting the horrifying aftermath of a nuclear attack on the American Midwest.
Yeah.
It was a cultural phenomenon watched by over 100 million people.
Wow.
And it had a profound impact on public perception of the nuclear threat.
I remember seeing that movie as a kid. It was incredibly disturbing.
Yeah.
Definitely stayed with me.
And it seems it had a similar effect on President Reagan.
Really?
He wrote in his diary about how deeply moved he was by the film.
Wow.
Describing it as a very effective and very depressing movie. This experience, combined with the growing public outcry against nuclear weapons, is believed to have influenced his approach to arms control negotiations with the Soviet Union.
So a fictional portrayal of nuclear war actually helped to shift the thinking of one of the most powerful people in the world.
That's the power of storytelling.
Yeah.
It can humanize complex issues, evoke empathy,
right,
and spark a sense of urgency.
And in the case of Reagan, it seems to have played a role in his decision to pursue a more conciliatory approach.
It seems so.
With the Soviets culminating in the Reykjavik summit in 1986.
Exactly.
What was the significance of that?
The Reykjavik summit was a landmark event.
Okay.
bringing together Reagan and Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev for face-to-face talks on arms control.
So did they actually make progress?
While they ultimately failed to reach a final agreement on eliminating all nuclear weapons,
Okay.
they did make significant progress in reducing the global nuclear arsenal.
So it was still a step in the right direction.
Absolutely. The summit led to the signing of the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty in 1987,
Okay.
which eliminated an entire class of nuclear missiles.
Wow.
It was a concrete demonstration that dialogue diplomacy and a willingness to compromise could lead to tangible results in reducing the nuclear threat.
So even in the midst of Cold War tensions,
Yeah,
leaders were able to find common ground
they were.
and take steps to avert a potential catastrophe. But what about today's geopolitical landscape?
Yeah.
Are there similar opportunities for dialogue and cooperation?
That's a complex question.
Yeah.
The current landscape is arguably even more fragmented and volatile than during the Cold War,
Right.
with multiple nuclear-armed states, shifting alliances,
Yeah.
and regional conflicts that threaten to escalate.
So how do we even begin to address this
Right.
in such a complex and uncertain world?
Yeah, where do we go from here?
Yeah, it feels like we're at a crossroads with this issue.
It is a crossroads.
Like, the potential for catastrophe is very real, but so is the possibility of change.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And Jacobson doesn't offer like easy answers
Right.
or simple solutions,
Yeah.
but she does give us this framework for thinking about it.
Okay.
She argues that prevention requires a multifaceted approach,
Okay.
addressing not just the technical aspects of nuclear weapons,
Right.
but also the political, the social, even the psychological dimensions of the threat.
So it's not just about dismantling weapons or signing treaties,
No.
it's about changing mindsets.
It is.
Fostering a culture of peace and cooperation.
Exactly. It's about recognizing our shared humanity,
Okay.
understanding the interconnectedness of our world, working together to create a future where nuclear weapons are seen as relics of a bygone era,
Okay.
not tools of power or instruments of destruction.
That makes sense, but it also feels incredibly daunting.
It does.
Like, where do we even begin?
Right? How do we shift the global mindset on such a deeply ingrained issue?
Yeah.
Jacobson points to the power of storytelling,
Okay.
the way it can shape perceptions, influence decision-making, and inspire action.
Right.
She reminds us that the story of nuclear weapons isn't just about technical specifications and military strategies. It's a human story,
Right.
a narrative that's been shaped by fear, ambition, ideology,
Yeah.
and the ever-present shadow of annihilation.
And as we've discussed, that story has had its share of dark chapters.
Yes.
Hiroshima, Nagasaki, the Cold War arms race.
Right.
Countless close calls and near misses.
But there have also been moments of hope,
Yeah.
like the Reykjavik summit and the subsequent reduction in nuclear arsenals.
Right. So we need to focus on those and amplify those.
We do. We need to amplify those moments of hope, those stories of progress and cooperation.
Yeah.
We need to challenge the narratives of fear and division that have fueled the nuclear arms race for decades.
So it's not just about preventing a nuclear war.
Right.
It's about creating a new story.
A narrative that emphasizes peace cooperation and our shared responsibility for the future of our planet.
That's a powerful way to frame it.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that the story of nuclear weapons is still being written, and we all have a role to play in shaping its ending.
Okay.
Jacobson's work is a call to action,
Yeah.
an invitation to engage in this critical conversation
Okay.
and contribute to a more peaceful and sustainable future.
So how do we translate that into tangible steps?
Right.
What can we as individuals, as citizens, actually do
Yeah.
to make a difference on an issue that seems so far beyond our control?
It starts with awareness,
Okay.
with understanding the complexities of the nuclear threat
Hmm.
and challenging the assumptions and narratives that perpetuate it.
Yeah.
Jacobson encourages readers to educate themselves, to engage in discussions,
Right.
and to share their knowledge with others.
Mhm.
It's about creating a ripple effect of awareness, starting with our own circles of influence.
So those everyday conversations?
Those moments where we challenge a friend's opinion or share an article on social media,
Right.
those small acts can actually contribute to a larger shift in thinking.
Absolutely. Jacobson believes that a critical mass of informed and engaged citizens can create a powerful force for change,
Wow.
influencing policymakers, shaping public opinion, and ultimately creating a more peaceful and secure world.
And it's not just about influencing those in power, it's also about personal choices, right?
You're right. Jacobson emphasizes the importance of aligning our actions with our values.
Okay.
She encourages readers to support organizations working for nuclear disarmament, to vote for candidates who prioritize peace and diplomacy,
Right.
and to invest in sustainable and ethical practices that promote a more just and equitable world.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that every choice we make, every action we take contributes to the larger narrative.
Yeah, it's a reminder that we're not just passive bystanders in this story.
Right.
We're active participants and our choices matter.
They do, but it's easy to feel overwhelmed by the scale of the challenge.
It is.
To feel like our individual actions are insignificant in the face of such a massive threat.
Yeah.
But Jacobson reminds us that even small acts of courage and compassion can have a ripple effect,
Okay.
inspiring others and creating a momentum for change. She points to historical examples like the Civil Rights Movement and the anti-apartheid struggle,
Right.
where ordinary people driven by a shared vision of a better world came together to achieve extraordinary things.
So it's about finding that spark of hope, that belief in our collective power to create change, even when faced with seemingly insurmountable challenges.
Precisely, it's about remembering that the future is not predetermined.
Yeah.
That we have the capacity to choose a different path,
Right.
to write a new story for humanity, one that's grounded in peace, cooperation, and a deep respect for the sanctity of life.
This deep dive has been a roller coaster of emotions.
Yeah.
Fear, anxiety, despair.
Yeah.
But also moments of hope, inspiration, and a renewed sense of purpose. Jacobson's work has certainly given us a lot to think about. It has.
And hopefully it sparked a similar sense of urgency in our listeners.
It's not about dwelling in fear or despair.
Right.
It's about channeling those emotions into constructive action.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that we have a choice to make, a responsibility to uphold, and a future to create.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one message you want our listeners to take away?
I would encourage listeners to reflect on the question Jacobson poses at the end of her book.
Okay.
What will you do to save the world?
Wow.
It's a question that might seem overwhelming,
It does.
but it's ultimately about finding those small acts of courage, compassion, and commitment that resonate with your values and contribute to a more peaceful and just world.
It's a powerful call to action, a reminder that we all have a role to play in shaping the future.
We do.
And it's not about grand gestures or heroic feats.
All right.
It's about those everyday choices, those small acts of kindness and awareness that can collectively create a ripple effect of positive change.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a privilege to explore these complex issues with you.
It has.
And to our listeners, thank you for taking the time to engage with this critical topic.
Yes.
Remember, the future is not predetermined. It's a story that's still being written. And we all have the power to shape its ending, choose wisely, act with courage, and never lose hope.